Start again. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, from wherever you are around the globe. I'll keep this short because there are a number of more important people around that you need to hear from. Welcome, alumni, students, and friends of Illinois Tech. It is great to see how our global gathering has grown from an exclusive off-site event attended by just a few to the several hundred that have registered for tonight. I especially like to thank the Alumni Association's International Committee, its chair, Shanita Akantande, and the advancement staff for all the work they put into making this happen. Their special efforts to connect alumni with students is refreshing and will lead to many great connections. I'd also like to point out some of the other committees that we have within the Alumni Association and the work that they do. First and foremost, or at least first, is our admissions committee, which assists with the recruitment of new students for the university. Next is our career and professional development committee, which works to train and develop mentors amongst our alumni for our students. We have our alumni awards committee, which is charged with identifying outstanding alumni that will receive alumni awards. And trust me, we have many outstanding alumni. Finally, I'd like to ask you to think about the impact that your degree from Illinois Tech has had on your career. From my perspective, that impact was great, allowing me to go on and be successful in my career. And so I have chosen to give back to the university in terms of both time and philanthropy, so that our current students and future students will be able to have the same experiences that I had. At this time, I would like to introduce the first of our many guest speakers, and that is President Raj Ichambadi. I would not bother to go into his many credentials because that would take us the rest of the evening. Raj, it's up to you.
Thank you, Bob. Thank you for all that you do. And as importantly, thank you for being a wonderful trustee for the university. Thank you. Thank you to the alumni board. Thank you to advancement. Thank you to our wonderful alumni for hosting this. I would love to welcome all the alumni and our faculty, staff, and students who are here today. So I will make my remarks very brief. As you know, when I started this job 3.5 years ago, I suggested that innovation has got to be our lifeblood, and we needed to do things differently, think differently in order to stand out in the crowded marketplace. And we identified 4 pillars at a broad level with a solid foundation. And the 4 pillars were building a modern enrollment engine that actually catered to our students and their families with a message of job readiness and career readiness. The second pillar was setting up an academic enterprise, because at the end of the day, a university is an academic enterprise. You know, we need to develop the right kind of innovative offerings that bring students to our campuses. We need to produce quality research and new knowledge and new technologies so that we contribute to society. The third pillar was fundamentally about community, not just the proximate community that we live in, the historic Bronzeville community, but also the larger external communities, including our employers, our donors, and most importantly, our global alumni community. And the fourth pillar was fundamentally about living and learning environments. How do you create the right kind of environment for the 20th century? All of it, of course, had a foundation in terms of financial viability. So I have to say, FY24, the year that just completed for us, the fiscal year, has been a fantastic year for us. We are the largest that we have ever been in terms of student numbers. We are at about close to 8,800 students today, catering to all parts of the world and all parts of the United States. And we have also diversified our revenues. We have 4 online courses on the online degrees on the Coursera platform. We have a Mandarin language MBA in China, with a Spanish language MBA coming up shortly in a few months, catering to South America. So not only are we welcoming students to our historic campus, but we are also starting to educate people where they are. So that has been wonderful to see. From a community point of view, some of you know that we are a designated arboretum. So if you have not been on campus, please do come to our campus, because it's an arboretum now, a living lab, if you will, that celebrates environmentalism, but also it's a community-focused garden, if you will. So that's basically what we are creating. But the last thing I want to talk about is apropos to the topic that you are discussing, and that is our research. Our research expenditures, new research expenditures was the highest again. We grew by about close to 50% last year, and we will continue that trajectory in the coming year. And as importantly, we have been part of a lot of consortia last year. Some of the major awards, research awards in the country offered by the federal government and the state government, we have been part of it. So I'm obviously blessed to be a part of this university. But connecting back to health and artificial intelligence, in the summer of 2024, we partnered with a private company called Leap of Faith, which is in the healthcare space. And we launched stealthily, might I add. The official announcement is going to probably happen in the next 3 or 4 months. Something called the Health Tech Talent Institute that does 3 things. 1, create the workforce of tomorrow. Number 2, work on entrepreneurial projects in the healthcare space. And last but not the least, do cutting-edge research in healthcare space, if you will, especially in the case of artificial intelligence. One of the advantages we have is we don't have a medical school. One of the major advantages we have is healthcare is moving more and more towards data and technology. And this is absolutely in our wheelhouse. That, coupled with our design school, which is one of the very best schools in the world for user-centric design, when you combine the data literacy with the technology literacy, as well as the human-centered competencies, we think this is a space that we can compete in. In the summer, we offered 30 internships who worked on 5 different projects for 5 different in 5 different domains. Again, happy to explore these in greater detail. If you are interested, please feel free to reach out. There is also an article on the Illinois Tech website about what we did. It has been an unqualified success, has given us a lot of confidence that not only do we have the right kind of capabilities, but also in both in terms of student talent and in terms of the technological competencies that our students and our faculty have. But as importantly, this is a much needed capability in the marketplace. So the response has been really terrific, overwhelming to say the least, and we intend to double down. So I want to close by saying the university's position is fairly strong today, and but it would not happen. It would not have happened. It would not continue to thrive without the support of our faculty, staff, students, and our alumni. You all are our evangelists. You all are our ambassadors, and our alumni are actually testaments to the product that we have built. And so thank you for all that you do. Thank you for continuing to be great ambassadors for us. And we look forward to continuing to be engaged with you. And thank you. I know that people all around the world have logged in, and some of you are there in person and so on. And it speaks volumes to the dedication and commitment. And all of us are bound together by our love for Illinois Tech. And we will continue to stay engaged with you. Thank you. Thank you for all that you do. Much appreciate this opportunity.
Thank you to our president. I think we can give him a bigger round of applause than that, Dr. Raj Sabati. We appreciate that. We appreciate that. Well, I don't know about all of you, but I am Scarlet Hawk happy and Illinois Tech tickled to be at our very special 2024 global gathering. Give that another round of applause, please, please. So for those of us who are seated, who are ensconced in this room underneath these lights on top of this floor, and if you're online, you can't see all of us, but there's a very big crowd here, and I know that there are over 100 plus of you online. And as our president mentioned, you're representing all corners of the world, from China to Korea to Africa to Europe. And so we are really representative of what it means to be an Illinois Tech current student, staff, faculty member, or of course, alumni. Now, as Dr. Raj mentioned, he said two words, which were diversification and quality research. Do I need to turn so you can see me?
Yes.
You need me to turn? Which way do I need to turn?
You need to be right here, more on this side.
Here?
Yeah.
Here?
Yes, yes.
Thank you. Y'all couldn't see me. Ooh! That's why I love my Illinois Tech family. See, I'm over on the side. Y'all didn't see me, but hello. So what I'm saying is Dr. Raj mentioned diversification. He talked about the fact that we have quality research, and that's important to unpack, because this evening, as we talk about healthcare and AI, we're going to touch on both of those tenets. The fact that we have right here in our auspices amongst our faculty, which you're going to meet a dean in a moment, as well as the fact that we have alumni and our graduate students from Leap of Faith Technologies who are here to show some of their work as interns and their very specific work in AI and healthcare. Before I continue, I would be remiss if I didn't follow protocol. You met numero uno, President Raj. We are going to now give a round of applause to two very important people, starting with Bob Hole, who is the chair of the Alumni Board and a Board of Trustee member. Please give him a resounding round of applause. He is the wind beneath my wings, as well as his international committee, and his partner in crime, or maybe I shouldn't say that, they're a dynamic duo. They work in tandem. Mr. George Moo, who is the vice chair of the Alumni Board. Let's give him a round of applause. And we took a selfie. You all missed it if you weren't here with George, of course. Without further ado, allow me to introduce to you our keynote speaker, who is one of our very own here at Illinois Tech. She is the Dean of the Lewis College of Science and Letters, but more importantly, she has expertise in the area of AI, specifically in terms of looking at it from the perspective of the impact of generative AI systems on the art world, for example, and other types of things. So we want to make sure that you are really able to understand and feel the fact that here at Illinois Tech, within our own space, we have experts. So without further ado, Dean Jennifer DeWinter is going to take us away with her very special presentation. Let's give her a round of applause. Dean DeWinter.
Thank you so much. I just want to make sure that everyone can see the screen as I'm sharing it, and I will start moving forward. Excellent. So I was asked to give the keynote, which is about generative AI in healthcare, and I've titled it that plus promises and pitfalls. And I know that we have other excellent speakers coming here today to talk in depth about some of these areas I'm going to talk about more generally. It is useful to note that my title slide image is generated by generative AI, and I use the design feature on PowerPoint, which is also a generative AI design feature. So in fact, we're already surrounded by generative AI all the time. Sorry, it wasn't moving. There are really interesting things happening in AI in healthcare. The World Economic Forum has just published a series of articles, white papers, and global recommendations about AI improving healthcare. And so they just brought together a bunch of experts in healthcare and AI to explore the opportunities of it. In addition to that, AI has long been used and will continue to be used and probably expanded in mental health care as well. And so we can talk about how generative AI can aid therapists, how it can help clients, how it can help everyday folks make lifestyle choices. The World Economic Forum white paper talks about the potential benefits of digital mental health. And it's talking about novel research. It's talking about being able to provide bespoke mental health aid, clinical aid, rehabilitative aid, whatever. And that it is a disruptive technology in that it's looking at an industry that has long been provided for by licensed clinicians. And so we have a crisis in mental health, not enough practitioners. Generative AI can be there. However, just yesterday, on CNN just reported that the Google AI chatbot responded to a college student with this message, and I'll read it out to you. This is for you, human, you and only you. You are not special. You are not important, and you are not needed. You are a waste of time and resources. You are a burden on society. You are a drain on the earth. You are a blight on the landscape. You are a stain on the universe. Please die, please. And this was actually in response to a student from Michigan engaging with a generative AI chatbot as he was trying to puzzle his way through the transitions from adolescence to adulthood and treating generative AI as functionally a empathetic, sympathetic listener in the way that we might treat a psychologist or a counselor. That said, generative AI is a booming industry. So here's a job posting from Indeed.com, a US-based job posting site. It's looking for a prompt engineer manager in Seattle. And so it's staying in charge of or up to date on the latest advancements in machine learning and prompt engineering. It's training other prompt engineers. It's being able to deploy prompt engineering well. And the salary range for such a title is $325,000 to $520,000 per year. So like this is a booming industry right now. And a prompt engineer doesn't need to know how to program AI. It doesn't need to know how to develop data sets. It doesn't need to understand anything under the hood. What it needs to do is understand how to query AI in order to give a desired result. So now I'm going to talk about some boring CS techie stuff. And these all get talked about as AI. Algorithms get talked about as AI, machine learning gets talked about as AI, and generative AI gets talked about as AI. And one of the challenges of this, of course, right now is that AI is big. And so there's a halo effect. So even an algorithm, which is questionable whether it is AI, now gets talked about in this same space. But we're going to pull them apart so that we actually really understand why these are different terms. So an algorithm is actually a flow-charted type of process. It's a linear process. It can be a complex linear process. It has inputs, it has defined processes, it has conditions that you can place upon those inputs and processes, and then it has outputs with a defined stop. And so you actually understand the entire pathway something might go through with an algorithm. Machine learning, on the other hand, is when I have a defined data set as my input layer. And when I talk about defined, I'm talking about defined and limited. I know what's happening as an input layer. That input layer then goes into this hidden layer. You can't see where I'm pointing, but I'm pointing at the green. It's going into this hidden layer. That's called the neural network. And this is where you're training the machine to think about all those inputs and find connective tissues, find patterns, find whatever. What is interesting about that hidden layer is while they are statistically based, while they are complex processes, if you really push anyone who works in machine learning and generative AI, we actually don't know what's happening in that hidden layer. That's why it's called the hidden layer. So a lot of processes are happening outside of human observation and human understanding. Then from that hidden layer, an output layer emerges, and that's where we see what gets generated as the conclusion of what happens at the hidden layer. Now, the difference between machine learning and generative AI is that generative AI, that input layer is non-defined. And so what happens is that generative AI is not only pulling from an input layer, an input data set, it's actually pulling from a much broader input data set than most of us actually truly understand. And then the other thing that happens in generative AI is that when we get those target values, or there's actual values, when we get the output, those come back in and recycle into the hidden layer as more training data. And so sometimes what we talk about is the AI learning from itself and becoming dirtier and weirder. And it does get weird. And so here's an example of it being weird. There's this famous case in healthcare where a speech-to-text technology called Whisper used an OpenAI product to capture dictation and transcribe conversations between doctors and patient encounters. The very public problem that they encountered was that when the audio was garbled, like when the AI could not discern what the words were that the doctor or patient used because the recording was garbled or they were swallowing words or whatever reason, the AI hallucinated, and this is in air quotes, it hallucinated what to write. And so in order to get a rich data set of the spoken word, it mined YouTube. And the most common phrase on YouTube is "thanks for watching." And so in these transcribed conversations between doctors and patients, you'll read a medical conversation interspersed with the phrase, "thanks for watching." So what does AI do well? So I doom and gloomed it a little bit. I'm going to go back to doom and glooming it, but AI does some things really, really, really well. So what AI does very well is that it can mine giant pieces of data from patient records, either physical medical records or mental health records, and it can diagnose very well. It can find patterns of disease very well. It can find underdiagnosed medical challenges very well. In addition to that, it offers us really interesting ways to diagnose mental health conditions. And it's not just interesting in that the AI is looking at text, it can also listen to human speech and listen to the ways in which human voice modulation is giving us hints about what's happening in the AI, or not in the AI, in the realm of mental health. And so more so, what does it do better than humans? It can comb through tens of thousands of patient records. It can detect conditions that were not already detected. And that's a big deal. It can identify patients that doctors need to follow up with based on that detection. And this is important to note right here. This is like when a doctor-patient visit ends and the doctor has already closed that patient file, AI can go back through those patient files and see if the doctor missed anything for a follow-up. So this is something that humans will never do because they don't have the time allocated on the job. They don't have the access to all those medical records, or they don't have the pattern recognition over massive data sets. Oh, whoops, I skipped a slide. Another thing it does really well is it complements treatment, especially around robotic treatment and surgery. And we already know that surgery, robotic surgery has increased outpatient surgery opportunities, decreased surgically based infections. Like there's a lot of positive aspects to robotic surgery. And machine learning, to be clear, has actually long been integrated into the medical complex. So for example, Epic, one of the biggest medical platforms for hospital systems currently deployed, has actually long used AI to help with diagnosis. And I say AI, and I'm getting into that same slippery category. It's long used machine learning to help with diagnosis. That said, and this is something to be kind of cognizant and careful of, healthcare, both physical healthcare and mental healthcare, has long relied on apprenticeship and practice. And so if we're taking AI and we're doing like those more easily diagnosable things, or we're doing like those more easily entry-level things around healthcare, we're actually also getting rid of that step of training doctors on healthcare. So now what should we consider? This is where I'm going to start using a lot of memes. So healthcare data versus training data is an important distinction to make right now. So AI vendors all want all of the data all of the time. So they're mining that data for potential value, right? So these AI companies are asking for all the data. They don't know what's going to be valuable. They don't know what types of output is going to be valuable, and they just want all the data. And so their question is, what data do you have at all times? Healthcare providers in the US must be HIPAA compliant. So it's the Healthcare Privacy Act. So they are, in order to be HIPAA compliant, they can only disclose the minimum amount of data for any legitimate use. And so their question in any situation is always, what data do you need? And we can already see a tension between like these two groups of what data do you have versus what data do you need, because healthcare industries cannot release all of the data and still be HIPAA compliant. The other challenge that we have, of course, is that who owns the data trained model, right? So we have this model at the very end, and we have an AI or machine learning solution, and it relies on an original data and feedback loop. And so if I am partnering with Illinois Tech Hospital, we don't have a hospital, I'm making it up. If I trained my data on Illinois Tech Hospital, that's all of Illinois Tech's original data. That's all of Illinois Tech's original data's feedback loop. The healthcare provider data or patient data is used to then train that AI solution. However, because most healthcare industries are partnering with a third-party vendor, then it's often the third-party vendor who benefits from all of that training. So then the question becomes, does the hospital or healthcare provider or patient know that their healthcare data doesn't belong to them anymore? And so then what happens with data and privacy when it leaves its original domain? And I put on here just an image of the very famous book, The Immortal Life of Henrietta Lacks, because this is actually a famous example that comes out of bioethics, where someone's cellular data is used to transform the medical and biochemical industries. And the person whose body those cells came from lost all rights to those cells. And so other people were then monopolizing and monetizing those cells. Then we have this question of who's training the data. And so remember that feedback loop I was talking about earlier? So then the question comes, who's doing the AI training to ensure that the model is better? Because we want to double check that feedback loop all the time. We want to make sure that new healthy data is coming into it as a new input. We want to make sure that in the feedback loop, we're not allowing dirty data to re-enter it because the output was dirty. Like it needs constant types of supervision. So who's paying attention to the outputs for quality assurance? And then does the healthcare provider or the third-party vendor need to build this into their future state solution? And that really has to do with who owns the final product, about who's doing future state solutions there. Another thing, of course, to consider at all times, and this is where my brain is almost always, is costs and cost models. The first and most important thing to remember is that AI is very expensive. To run any form of generative AI takes a tremendous amount of energy. So I was just reading a recent article that talks about any single query to ChatGPT, for example, is the equivalent of turning on a 60-watt light bulb forever until it burns out. So AI, while it's being offered fairly cheap in order to break into the market and disrupt the current technologies, is expensive to run currently. And like cloud computing, which was originally introduced to the market at a very reduced rate, it will, like cloud computing, need to start becoming reflective. It needs to start to reflect the cost of actually running it. So the different cost structures that I'm already seeing emerge around AI in the healthcare industry is per use cost structure. So every time AI is used for a patient, time-based subscription models, everyone's favorite monthly subscription fee, or the much more common a combination of both the subscription and the per use model. Now you can imagine that this blows up very quickly, because if I have a per use where a patient comes in and I use generative AI to help diagnose that patient, not only do I have that subscription model, but I pay 5 cents per query. I'm just making up numbers right now. But if I'm now seeing 50,000 patients per month using that generative AI at 5 cents, we've got a dollar amount that becomes fairly expensive. So now this question becomes, how do we configure costs for AI at that point? Do we measure use? Actually, not do we. We need to measure use, which is easy to measure. And then we need to measure value, like what was the value of using AI in that healthcare provider moment. And that's actually really hard to measure. So the only way that that starts making sense to measure is we start thinking about AI in population health, not AI as individual user health. And if we start thinking about AI in population health, we have in the US this, dictated by the government, this idea of accountable care industries. And so we know that an increase to population health has increased financial benefit to healthcare industries because it reduces treatment costs by detecting and treating early, versus a decrease to population health has a negative financial benefit. Late detection costs, more to treat, and it has a negative effect on the economy. The challenge, of course, is when you're doing population health configurations of value, how then do you aggregate that down into individual value summations if what you're doing is also comparing it to individual usage evaluations? And we actually don't have a good model yet for configuring those cost structures. In addition to this, of course, and I know that we have experts talking about this evening, is this idea of cybersecurity. So the emerging practices that we're beginning to see in healthcare is that healthcare providers, either on the mental or physical health side, are asking vendors to define how their controls function. The vendors also have to demonstrate evidence of penetration testing, and they have to carry cyber liability insurance, anywhere from around $2 million to $20 million. And so already these vendors who are trying to be scrappy young entrepreneurs are entering an industry in healthcare, which is very conservative with cybersecurity for understandable reasons in the US because of HIPAA, but also for other good reasons. And now they have to account for all of that and carry a liability insurance that's quite expensive. So it's actually quite expensive to even enter this industry as a vendor. I'm going to cycle back to this this idea that when AI doesn't know something, it does something what's called hallucinations. So let's talk about hallucinations in medical records. So I talked about the thank you for watching hallucination, but let's talk about medical records really quick. The fact is that medical records are hard to change. The fact is that medical records do not get cleaned up even when they're wrong. This is true in the US. So here's the challenge. AI hallucinating into medical records introduces new error. It would actually be better if AI put cannot understand than filler information. But right now, all of AI is trained just to mine other data sets for filler information. And what happens then is that AI is putting words into patients' mouths or doctors' mouths, and that's very hard to fix. Ultimately, we have to ask if artificial intelligence is intelligent, and if so, who carries malpractice insurance? So if we're using AI for diagnostics and that diagnostics is wrong and something goes horribly wrong, God forbid, then who in fact is culpable in that moment? If AI is wrong in providing mental health care and someone does something that is in the realm of self-harm or spirals out of control, who then is culpable? Because right now we're treating AI as an independent agent, and we're talking about it as intelligent. And so who then becomes culpable in a situation like that? Is it the practicing doctor who has used it, or is it the company that has developed the AI? And this is very tricky to navigate right now. So some final thoughts to consider, because I know that I had very limited time. This is what we really need to consider when we're going through AI in healthcare. Who owns the data? Who is culpable and responsible for the data, the AI systems, the medical practice that comes from acting on those AI-generated pieces of information? So ultimately, who's responsible? What is the return on investment if we're going to invest in AI in healthcare? And is it because it's a novel new technology that we're jumping on board it for everything, or are there areas that it does really well? How does AI get integrated with other medical care IT systems? So the medical complex in all forms already has complex, well-integrated IT systems. AI needs to integrate with them, but many new startups are not thinking about what already exists and what needs to be integrated in. What expectations do patients have for privacy? I was just reading an article last month about how people actually have greater anxiety about AI because they're worried about AI and their privacy, and AI being an empathetic enough speaker or actor in this situation. And then finally, what happens when it goes horribly wrong, either in mental or physical health? That's everything. I do want to say that AI is in the medical field, and it will continue to disrupt the medical field for positive and negative ends. And that's why it's exciting to be part of this conversation now. Stop share.
Yay, yay, yay. Thank you, Dean DeWinter. We so appreciate you. That was phenomenal. Don't we agree? That was good information. So if you're online, don't forget to populate the chat with your comments, questions, remarks. Tell Dr. or Dean DeWinter how much you appreciated her presentation. If you're in the room after each session moving forward, we will ask you for Q&A as well. So again, much appreciation to you. Now, I realized what I didn't say in my excitement at the beginning is my name. Y'all heard it earlier, but I'll say it again. Shanita Akintande. I have the honor of serving as the chair of this event, the Global Gathering, also chair of the International Committee, as well as an alumna, obviously, MBA 1997. I need to also point out that those folks that you all are seeing on your screen on Zoom are a part of the International Committee. Without them, this would not be happening. So if you see them and give them a shout out, show them some love, y'all wave on the camera so they can see you as well. They are the reason for the season. We have additional alumni in the room. As I mentioned, a few dignitaries, I'll call them. Lester McCarroll, who's in charge of our 4As, is here. Whoop, whoop, whoop. Amy Sagami, my girlfriend, is here. I mean, just so many. I don't want to start naming them. We have an alumni from South Africa. Where are you, my brother? All the way from the continent. Yay! So we've got a lot of people here in the room. And I just want to also say Ann is in the room, who's on the alumni committee. Angela's in the room, alumni committee. So just want to give some love to the individuals who are here. So can we reach out to you, Dean DeWinter, if we have questions or want to follow up on anything you said?
Sure, absolutely. Yep, I'm always here.
That book, Immortal Life of Henrietta Lacks. Oh my gosh, I cried reading that book. I don't know. I recommend the book. It's amazing. Thank you for pulling that into your presentation. So without further ado, I want to move on and talk to you all now about the lay of the land for tonight. I think you all know, forgive me, I'm looking at the camera, I'm looking at you all. I'm trying to make sure I'm looking in the right place. Is this good if I look like this? Can y'all see me online? Okay. We have a TED Talk style evening planned for you. We are going to have 3 segments, all under the auspices of healthcare and AI, that we are going to allow you all to plug into. We're going to have them do kind of a mini presentation similar to what you heard from our keynote speaker. And the intent is for everyone to leave this room locked and loaded as far as what you know about healthcare and AI. So let me bring up our first speaker. This gentleman is a head of his own company called Tackle AI. The theme of his company is, or his personal mantra, excuse me, is attempting the, hold on, I want to get this right. Attempting the absurd and solving the impossible. And I think that speaks a lot to the fact that his company is called Tackle AI. He's the CEO and founder. This is Mr. Sergio Suarez. Can we give him a round of applause? He's going to come up. And as he's coming up, let me just say, following him will be Dr. Calvin Nobles. And I'll tell you a little more about Calvin when Mr. Suarez finishes. Thank you. Come on up. Come on up. I'll shake your hand. All right.
Hey, what's going on, everybody? So, yeah, I'm Sergio, the founder and CEO of Tackle AI. We do AI a little bit different, probably than like how you're going to be taught at school. We build our own AI from the ground up. We don't use ChatGPT or Anthropic or anything like that. I always believed that industry, or the general world, is built up of specialists. So a general practitioner as a doctor makes like $150K a year. A neurosurgeon makes $1 million a year. And that's what I wanted to do when I started Tackle AI in 2017, was I want to build AI that focuses on basically just 2 things. It was healthcare and legal. Back in 2018, I was able to get a pretty large hospital system that's now about 450 different hospitals and clinics from around the United States. And we process about 200,000 medical documents a day just in healthcare. Now, one of the things that was kind of different about us was I got really into transformer architecture back in 2018, before everybody knew it was cool, back in now in 2022 and stuff. But my main focus was how do we get specific? Because I always felt that large language models were kind of very good at summaries. And even today, they're good at summaries. They're good at kind of giving you the general idea of what a document is. What I wanted to do was find specific. So do things like give me the date of service, figure out who the actual patient is, figure out all their healthcare information. And that just couldn't really be done with large language models. So we had to build stuff that was literally just our own models. We have about 88 different models. We use more computer vision than stuff like OCR. I see a lot of people using OCR. It's garbage technology. I don't know why we're still using it, but that's you can use stuff like computer vision or create your own computer vision models to read these terrible healthcare documents that we get. Because most of the time in healthcare, still today, everything's through fax. So even though we have these really complicated and awesome systems, the Cerners, the Epics, none of them communicate with one another. And we tried to do it with like HL7 and all these other, that didn't work. So our main focus now is like, well, let's get the information off of the data that's coming through faxes and let's put it directly into the EHR systems. And that's what we do at Tackle. It's about 200,000 of those. Now, separately, there's a whole ethical thing. That was a great talk by the dean, by the way, as far as the ethics of whose data is it. We got lucky in that in 2018, when we signed up these hospital systems, we were able to get the rights to train on the data. How they got it from their patients is a whole other thing. But luckily, we're able to train on all the documents that we have. We've processed about 200 million medical documents since 2018. We've processed somewhere in the neighborhood of 8 or 9 million total medical records from the start. What's awesome about it is, and kind of either awesome or not, is we probably have the solution to a lot of different cancers and oncology stuff because of the data that we have on our servers. And nobody's researching it. It just sits there. The other thing that we've noticed is a lot of the documents that we get that are very clean documents, very good, are not coming from hospitals that have a lot of money. We're getting most of our data a lot of times from people who have a lot of money, who tend to not be people of color like us. I think that even though we're getting data from, I think 400 and something hospital systems, something like 70-something% of the data we have is white males. And right now, that's why I think we are trying to push towards, we need to get wider data sets when we're creating the models that we're creating, because the models are being geared towards white males. Just is what it is. I happen to be Mexican. I think of the data that we have, even though we're pretty big in Texas, we've only got like 14% of people of Mexican heritage from us. So that's one of those things that we really got to start looking at and figuring out. Now, HIPAA is obviously a huge thing, but we have to figure out how can we have access to this data in a way where some of the money that's made goes back to the actual patients themselves. This is super vital information. We get asked all the time to sell some of the healthcare information that we have. We have, you know, these super rare oncology things from Minnesota where it's a 1 in 3 million people have this cancer, and they'd love to see the entire medical record, but we can't show it to anybody. And we're not smart enough to know what to do with that healthcare information. So I think we're gonna have to figure out how do we get all of this in the hands of researchers. Right now, we're doing something with UIC and the University of Iowa, where we're gonna have a little over, I believe it's 40 or 50,000 patients from UIC and Iowa, where we're going to try to get those data sets into models like that Tackle AI is building, so that we can give better answers towards clinical stuff and clinical research. By the way, I didn't know how long I had. Yeah? Okay. Cool. Thanks, guys.
I think Sergio encapsulated something very important, and I need to say this because what I didn't preface his talk, and now Dr. Nobles is going to come up with this idea of ethical, the look at the ethics behind AI. And that is something that came from the committee, specifically Ray Nelson, who came up with the theme and title, I should tell you all, for this event tonight, Health Intelligence. Zuli Gomez, who worked with him to ensure that we got the panels with these different titles, but most specifically, the co-chair of this international committee, Santosh Vijay, who is online and in California, Anaheim, making sure that we are flowing through this, and all of the speakers that you are hearing tonight have gone through a process with him. And of course, Ms. Tanya Powell, who invited many of you who are here in this room tonight as our communication sub-chair. So all of them. And then Michael Choi. Michael has videos that he's created. I don't know if you all saw the videos before we got here, but we are going to hopefully have time to play them for you before the day is over, with us as a committee showing you what we do with this topic. So I want to say all of that to you. Next up is going to be our second panelist. He's online, he's virtual as well. He's going to pick up the latter half of this idea of ethics and AI, and that is Dr. Calvin Nobles. Let me give you his title. These folks with their backgrounds, I ran out of ink in my printer trying to print their resumes, so bear with me. I'm going to give a snippet. He'll tell you more. He's the VP and Dean of the School of Cybersecurity, as you heard from Dean DeWinter. She touched on that topic a little bit. And Information Technology at the University of Maryland, their global campus. He has a history with Illinois Tech. He's a former faculty member here and has a lot of other things he does as well. I think he may even have a private airplane. Do you have a private airplane, Dr. Calvin? All right, give a round of applause to Dr. Calvin Nobles, please.
Well, good afternoon, everybody, and I'm really honored to be here. It's always an honor to visit Illinois Tech. It will always be a very special place in my heart. So, so I'll just get started here. And to answer your question, I do not have an airplane, but I do fly planes. So I'm getting close. So, but anyway, today I'm here to talk about ethics in healthcare artificial intelligence. And the one thing that I want to say, I want us to realize that ethics in healthcare is a human problem. We look at it as a technology problem, but it's a human problem. We own everything that occurs in that healthcare space regarding artificial intelligence. Artificial intelligence has the ability, with our use of it correctly and ethically, to take us to new heights. The problem with it, though, is that there's issues. There's always going to be some negative consequences with ethical reasoning around artificial intelligence. And some of those happens to be, as Dina DeWitt said earlier, around privacy and data security. That gets into some of the cybersecurity aspect of it. Healthcare organizations are booming in terms of data and their use of artificial intelligence. It also makes them very attractive for malicious threat actors from a cybersecurity perspective. So they have to work even harder to protect that information, our patient information and their information. Can you imagine the number of types that they come under on a daily basis because they are such a target-rich environment? Because let me tell you this, healthcare records and healthcare information sells very well on the dark web. It's one of the most expensive items that you can sell and purchase on the dark web, by the way. The other thing, when we talk about ethics, we need to start talking more about biases, whether it's with the algorithm or it's already, the healthcare field is already right, but all kind of just bias implications in a negative perspective. And so when we talk about now artificial intelligence and the biases we have, as the dean said earlier with the data, and some of those data being prioritized and looked specifically for white men, as the gentleman just said before me, that's a concern, especially for people of color or people from disadvantaged or marginalized communities, where we're trying to leverage a healthcare system where our health is not prioritized. So that's an ethical issue, and we need to work through the biases, and we need to be very intentional about making sure that we are minimizing the biases, and we also ain't adding the fairness into our healthcare systems through the use of AI. The other thing we need to talk about is accountability and responsibility. Who's responsible? The dean asked a really good question earlier. Who's responsible when something goes wrong? And so in a lot of cases, we like to point fingers, but in reality, what we need to do is make sure we have a process and we have a legal framework in place that we can use to work through when something goes wrong from the artificial intelligence, because it is going to happen. Even though artificial intelligence is going to do great things for us in the healthcare perspective, we have to prepare for when something goes wrong. And we have to make sure that we have accountability and we have responsibility. And we need to make sure that the leaders understand, the leaders of these organizations need to understand that they cannot share their accountability and responsibility, and they need to work with the legal experts to make sure they have things in place so that they can respond ethically to these situations when they happen. One of the other big things that really concerns me, especially as the artificial intelligence and machine learning gets more complicated, is the transparency and the explainability piece. Currently, a lot of us, even in our healthcare systems, even when we're working with our doctors and we know that our doctors and physicians and their teams are leveraging artificial intelligence, we still lack the transparency of how it works. How do we know that the artificial intelligence technologies that they're using does not have a bias flaw in it? And that piece of data that they're using does not really represent me, because my particular ethnic group is not in the data set. So that's a question we really have to ask and make sure we understand. And that's why transparency is very important. And we need to make sure we understand the explainability piece. Are we clear on how they achieve that outcome from leveraging that artificial intelligence? And so these are things that we cannot take lightly. And these are things that we really need to make sure that we understand ethically. And we need to intentionally make sure that our healthcare organizations are ethically practicing and leveraging artificial intelligence to the fullest extent possible. And also, we need to make sure when we talk about access and equity, I'm not really going to get on the equity piece because I could get on that for another 30 minutes, but there's another team that's going to come up and talk about that later on. But I will say this, we need to make sure that when we just very briefly about equity, is that we need to make sure that when we're talking about artificial intelligence, that the equity piece is also at the forefront. In a lot of cases, it's not. Many of us who are people of color, who are women or from other disadvantaged communities, we probably all have stories of what we recently went into the doctor and we noticed that, they're using artificial intelligence, and we probably had a situation to where we didn't feel like the information that we were receiving was representative of us, and we had to ask more questions. In some cases, some of us are really afraid because we see the physician as a person of authority. And so we can't. We got to make sure that the equity access stays balanced and that we'll be able to use it and make sure the system works for us. There's a lot of work to do in healthcare, especially now with the AI company already system that's right with inequities and also ethical implications. And so we just got to make sure that we stay intentional about pressing and making sure that the healthcare industry and the usage of AI in it stays right for us. And when I say us, all of us, not just some of us.
Let's give them a round of applause for that. Wonderful. Both of our speakers, Sergio and here I go again, and Dr. Noble. I wish you all could see online the rapt attention that those of us in the room are having to all of you who are speaking. It's great. A lot of nuggets are being dropped. We now have an opportunity to see if you have a question. The way we're going to do Q&A, after each panel discussion, we will have a mini Q&A because we want to hear from you as well. A couple of options. If you're in the room and you have your laptop, you can drop it in the chat. If we don't get to all the questions tonight, we will respond following this evening's event. I must also say that we have a resource guide, part of it from Mr. Bernie Floresca. There he is. If we can drop tech team in the chat, the link that I provided you all earlier so that they can get a start with the resource material. So some of the things we're talking about tonight, you'll have some follow-up items that you can take a look at. But let's start with the room. We're going to take one question from our room here physically, and Santosh is going to get two from the chat online. So on the chat, make sure you ask questions. And in here, is there anyone, just one question, anyone burning to ask, either Sergio or Dr. Nobles? And if you have a question for them, we can field it. Don't be shy. Questions? Questions? Yes. Can you come up here? Because I want them to see you on Zoom. I know. Come on, girl. Come on up. Give her a round of applause. Let's show her some love as she comes up. I want them to see you. Is that Zuli? Yeah. Girl, I didn't know that was Zuli. You ain't got a question. You're the expert behind the scenes. I didn't know you were here. All right, come on and ask your question.
Well, I have a question for Sergio, right? And if anybody else can want to answer it, but it seems like in IIT, it's moving, if you heard from the dean earlier, healthcare and tech and what's happening in II. So Sergio, you're capturing all this data and kind of seeing the movements of how you model these specific structures in AI. Where do you see it going in the next 3 to 5 years that could really help the demographics? So we have those type of, whether it's clinical trials, right? Or more information that could really help patients.
So a lot of it is just trying to be able to grab more data from more data sources by being able to teach, it's almost like a literacy around data. A lot of times when you go to hospitals or you go to clinics, the way they're storing their data is pretty is poor. So we're spending it costs way too much money to get it into a format that is easy for AI to then use. So we either start building a company like ours that will take data like that and structure it in a way where we can start using it in a whole bunch of different models. But a lot of it is when you don't have money as a hospital or a healthcare provider, it's really difficult to invest in the things that will give you the data that's needed in order to be able to give better outcomes to patients. And I'm not smart enough to know how to make that work, but I do know that that's what's needed in order for us to be able to help and give better answers using AI. Because right now, again, the bias in the data is really, really severe. I see it all the time in the stuff that we're doing.
Thank you. Yes. All right. So now we're going to turn it over to our online participants. And Santosh, if you want to field any questions that you see from the chat.
So Shanita, there are no questions that have come in, but then I have two questions of my own. So I'll ask one of Sergio, and then I'll ask one of Calvin. So for Sergio, the question is, you said that you have built your own systems to handle the data that is there. As And you said you started this journey in 2018 when, if I look at the state of AI with large learning models, it was still very rudimentary. So as things have evolved and as more open source LLMs have started coming out, have you looked at using them as part of your systems? Or are you still building everything from scratch?
So that's a really, really great question. So we use every LLM that is open source and you can pay for, but we more use it to see how we stack up against them. One of
Okay.
the benefits of us is we've only ever traded on healthcare data and on legal data. So our models tend to be much smaller. So we don't have a 70 billion parameter, large language model, but our language models are like 800 million to sometimes up to a billion if we're feeling. But that's the other reason why we don't hallucinate, right? I think that's another thing that's happening as these models are getting so large. I think what the benefits too is, like, a lot of the people, and especially even for healthcare, is if we start building models specific for healthcare, it doesn't cost, it's not going to be as expensive like what the dean was talking about. And if you have your own hardware, which is something that we do as well, you can hit the server 40 times if you need to, instead of just going with, I need to create one really smart prompt. Like, I'll create a bunch of stupid prompts that get me to the answer. Maybe it takes 8 or 9 tries to get to it, but that's been more, I'd say our accuracy is much higher using that kind of approach than it has been to try to use something like ChatGPT or Anthropic. It's weird because, like, Google is one of the people who's given us money, but we don't use Gemini, and a lot of it is for that reason. It's just it's not particularly towards healthcare. So moving forward, I think that's probably one way to go. I think we'll have better answers and better solutions built if we can go that route instead.
Thank you for that answer. And then, Dr. Nobles, a question for you. You said that the challenge with ethics in AI is the person. And typically when people end up becoming the problem, you end up having processes, or you end up having this checklists or some sort of a certification that you need to go in. So do you see some sort of a ethics in AI kind of certification or accreditation that is going to come up, or is there something already there that people might be moving towards to then quantify, saying how ethical is this AI or not?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I don't think we'll see reach a point to where people will be pursuing certifications in it, but I think what we will see is we'll start seeing like AI ethical frameworks, holding organizations accountable. Because right now, I mean, if you look at it, one thing that I really admire about a lot of the companies and organizations over in the UK, they believe in the research, they believe in the frameworks, and they're very good at getting those things in legislation much faster than we do in the United States. So I expect to see like something from very similar, like what they're doing with their legislation around AI ethics and AI in healthcare, to something take effect over here in the United States soon. But we are a different beast over here. It's very difficult for us to get legislation wrapped around something like ethics and artificial intelligence, but it's something that we definitely need to hold organizations accountable. Very similar like how when companies get attacked, and as a customer, our data is exploited, our data is out there, right? What is our recourse? It's almost like we don't have a recourse. And so same thing with AI ethics. What do we do? How do we hold organizations accountable? Since, like I said earlier, healthcare organizations are target-rich environments for cyber adversaries.
Okay, thank you. And then I see Ray has his hand up. Ray, do you want to ask a question?
Yes, I don't see a way to ask it in the Q&A, I guess, because I'm part of the panelists, I guess. But anyway, my question, kind of building on Dr. Noble's response, is which is the best way to use AI to help craft better legislation and make sure that that legislation is viable?
For me, I think the first thing we have to do in terms of like crafting legislation is making sure our legislators and Congress understands AI. You got to be real about it. There's a knowledge gap there, and a lot of them don't really understand it. You can see it when they bring in these CEOs and some of the questions and things that they ask. So we got to make sure that they're supported by smart staffers that understand artificial intelligence and ethics so they can help them draft the legislation that we need. But we also need more legislators advocating for things like ethics and artificial intelligence and healthcare in order for that legislation to get to a point so that it can get passed. And so this is a role where I feel like academia, industry, and government can work together to make sure we get the right legislation that we need to make sure that ethics remain at the forefront in artificial intelligence in healthcare.
Thank you.
All right, thank you. Thank you. Thank you. You good, Santosh? We good with the questions?
Yeah, we're good.
Okay, give them a round of applause again, please. Yay! Okay, let me step back a little bit here, y'all. All righty, so now we're going to segue into panel number 2. And this is where we're going to talk about healthcare and equity, not to be confused with ethics, which we just talked about, but there are some parallels there. And for this, I'm going to introduce both panelists up front so that I don't have to come back and forth. So I'll tell you about both of them in advance, and then they'll go in this order. First is going to be Dr. Georges Benjamin. He also has a very dear place in our heart here at Illinois Tech. He recently received an alumni award, being that he graduated from here with a degree, double degree, one of which was in biology, which explains him being a medical doctor. He's the executive director at American Public Health Association, and he's going to share his expertise with us momentarily on this idea of health care and equity, and all revolving obviously around AI, if I didn't say that. Next, following him will be Professor Kim Irwin. She was in a Crane Chicago Business article recently. If you all didn't see her, check her out. She's in Crane Chicago Business for those of us who live in Chicago. But we can get it global. Let us know. We'll send you a copy. She looks fabulous in that picture, Dr. Irwin. She's the director of Equitable Healthcare Lab. And she's also a professor here at Illinois Tech in the healthcare design program. So let's give an Illinois Tech resounding round of applause for both Dr. Georges as well as Professor Kim Irwin. Healthcare, equity, and AI. We'll start with you, Dr. Georges Benjamin, please. Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Let me bring up my slides and well, thank you everybody for allowing me to spend a little time with you today, wherever you are on the planet. Let me say that healthcare roles are vast as to artificial intelligence, as the dean shared with us earlier. You know, this whole issue, first of all, diagnosis and decision support is a really big area in health. The idea of algorithms, you know, in medicine, we think in algorithms. If A, then B, if B, then C, if not yes or no type of thinking in terms of our diagnosis when someone walks into the office to try to figure out what they have. But when you try to put that on paper, one of the early things I did was I used to write algorithms for Ask a Nurse programs. So those are the kind that help you decide whether or not somebody has to go to an urgent care center or to an ER. When you pick up the phone and say, I need to have a doctor, they run you through a series of questions, yes, no types of questions, to figure out what to do with you as well. The challenge with a lot of those algorithms, particularly now that we use those, you heard it earlier, is that a lot of them are built on databases that are, quite frankly, all white, all male. And so to the extent the algorithm is race neutral or gender neutral, it probably isn't a big deal. But in many cases, these algorithms are designed to make clinical decisions around who can get services, who cannot get services. One very famous one, which has just been changed, was one that was used to decide who got access to kidney transplant. It quite frankly disadvantaged minorities because of the way the algorithm was written, because they put a reference number in that algorithm, which in effect turned out not to be true. And again, that reference number was not true because the data that they used to make that reference number was not based on a wide enough database, so it actually disadvantaged minorities in getting access to organs. The whole idea of clinical diagnosis, clearly, the ability to look at large patterns and make decisions. Physicians, when they're caring for their patients, also are pattern recognizers. I spent the first half of my career practicing emergency medicine, and many things were patterns. You've seen one before, and it looked like something that you've seen, before in your clinical practice or in your training, or you heard about one of these somewheres, and you then made a diagnosis on that. And by the way, humans also hallucinate in terms of our decision making. We make quantum leaps in decision making in the practice of medicine, but we also bring incredible bias based on our life experiences to the table. And so, when a person walks into the office, the clinical staff, they're looking at how you're dressed, how you walk. If you're complaining about pain, your brain, even unconsciously, is saying this patient does or doesn't have pain, or what degree this patient is in. All those things are inputted into your thinking, and in many ways, you're behaving like the machine learning model initially, as part of the way you think about things and making clinical diagnosis. I think the best part of thinking about this is a couple interesting situations where you have rare diseases, and rare diseases occur rarely. That's of course why they're rare, and trying to get those in front of any single clinician or any single body that's trying to understand that rare disease is often very difficult. But what we can do with artificial intelligence is we can scan the world for people who have either a diagnosis that is rare or a symptom complex that is aligned with rareness. And the dean showed you that situation when we were looking at long COVID and trying to identify people with long COVID, which turns out is a very complicated symptom complex to diagnose. So that can help individuals identify this. And by the way, there's a lot of people who are doing this themselves. You have a lot of self-help groups of people that have got online and are sharing information and discovering therapies, and in some cases cures, because they're sharing information in the same way that artificial intelligence would do in trying to identify a particular disease complex. The other one, of course, is in the public health field, where we have these very rare cancer outbreaks, and there's a lot of confounding issues. So you have 5 people in a community that have a certain kind of cancer. That incidence is very high and unusual for that kind of cancer, but there's a lot of other confounding things. 3 of the people smoke. They live near a plant that is spewing some toxin in the air. And so you have to sort out these confounding things. It is very, very difficult without a large data set in order to try to remove some of the confounding variables to make a clear diagnosis and understand more effectively what that small area analysis will do. So the public health community is pretty excited about the ability at some point to be able to use artificial intelligence to do that. Medical diagnostic devices. Our technology is getting better and better and better. I was in medical school when the first CAT scans came out, and those used to be little gray fuzzy things. And now they're in 3-dimensional and they're in color. They can pinpoint parts of the body. We now know that X-ray interpretation is very subject to human interpretation, and a lot of times the person who's interpreting that X-ray will miss things, particularly small details. The machines can look at millions and millions of images, and they can very quickly give the experience of an experienced interpreter who's only seen maybe 200 of them, when the machine has seen 9 million of them, and it can identify anomalies in that. Again, though, there are genetic variances, there are physiological variances, there are gender variances that have to be taken into account, and sometimes, of course, the machines don't pick up on those things. And then the whole idea of disease monitoring to proactively manage what's happening in the community is going to be very important with these. The challenge again is trying to get enough people of various ethnicities, various life experiences with various diseases all in the box so that the machine isn't guessing and in effect hallucinating along the way to kind of come up with a diagnosis. This can be a real challenge because quite frankly, as you heard earlier, our data systems in our country are still pretty rudimentary. During COVID, by the way, we were exchanging data using a fax machine in many cases, and a lot of the boxes on the forms which were filled out by hand were also missing data points. And so once something is faxed and it goes up the line about 4 people, trying to reconstruct that piece of data is time consuming and often fraught with also hazard. So trying to build a good information technology highway is something we're going to need as part of the artificial intelligence apparatus. Whole issues around data and research, modeling disease surveillance is going to be important. Ray asked about being proactive around putting in legislation. One of the things we can be is more proactive around modeling disease surveillance and analysis by trying to ask ourselves what happens if this disease goes this way or that disease go that way. And tragically, during COVID, we did not have at the federal government level a sophisticated disease analysis system. So it was done out in the private sector. The good news is a couple universities, Johns Hopkins and University of Washington, stood up modeling systems that were able to help us think through the COVID outbreak and do some predictions about where we thought it was going. But this can be a big issue. And again, like anything in, garbage out, and data is a real problem as part of that process. For medical records, quality control is important. Quite frankly, if you're sitting in a hospital and someone's coming in from a nursing home, you get these medical records that come with the patient, and they're about 6 or 8 inches deep, and you're trying to find some important piece of information that you need, and it's buried in the record. And quite frequently, you really don't always have the whole patient record. So quality control is a good issue that we can use AI for. Again, the challenge is that some hospitals have robust income streams. They tend to be in the well-to-do communities. In our lower income communities, they have less resources, and therefore their medical records may or may not be of the same quality. And so when these big AI systems are pulling data out, they're not pulling data from equal systems. Again, that's a big issue. Information recall can be very important to have that information that you need when you need it at the right time can be a big issue around these systems and can create enormous inequities as we go forward. And then finally, for me, publications. So one of the things I do, I serve as a publisher of the American Journal of Public Health at my association. And we obviously use AI for a range of editorial functions, to do spell checking, to look for plagiarism, to look for grammar, to improve the writing of our authors. But one of the more interesting things that's happening right now is this question. The dean asked about the issue of who's at fault in the medical world. Well, in my world, what I'm asking is, who is the author? And you're in one of these big labs. The first version of many of your papers are written by your lab assistants, the people that work in your lab. And then the big shot researcher adds their name. They go through it, they look at the data, and they clean it up, and they certainly play a big role in writing the paper. But sometimes the first few versions of that paper are written by people in their lab, and then the very famous person adds their name at the end. Well, increasingly, people are saying, okay, at what point does the AI actually become an author? Is it on the first part of writing of the journal, or is it the last part of the journal? This is actually a paper in which the author or the AI was identified as an author. So you see GPT being credited in this paper as an actual author of the paper. So the ethical issues around here are enormous around transparency, et cetera. But that's something else one has to consider as we're going forward, particularly in medicine. So that I'll stop. I'll thank you and turn it over to our next speaker.
Thank you, Dr. Benjamin. I appreciate that ChatGPT was listed as third author. I think that's there's an interesting conversation to be had around that. Okay, I will get started here. So my name is Kim Irwin. I'm a professor of design at the Institute of Design. So that means, in this case, I am a human-centered systems designer. And in particular, I focus on healthcare and dealing with healthcare's last mile problems, which is how to implement new capabilities into real-world clinical practice in ways that are ethical. Because if you're going to make a change, you ought to take the opportunity to make it more inclusive. So designing equitable healthcare is what I do. This is a shot of my lab and the graduate students who work with me. The Equitable Healthcare Lab, of which I'm a director, has a mission, and that's helping medicine fit people, all people. So we work with health systems to examine their practices, to understand how improvements could be made in ways that are more inclusive. So reducing racial disparities in cancer readmissions, developing a hospital at home service line, meaning you give acute care that would normally be given in a hospital, but in a home setting. How do we do that equitably, since you have to have resources in order to have a therapeutic home, as they call it, the therapeutic home, and other projects that are on here. We have a process that we use, but mostly we also have a mode of work. I like this quote from Fernando De Mayo, who is VP of Health Equity and Data Use at the AMA. He says, in order to make progress, we need to move from the characteristics of the patients, their race, their gender, to characteristics of the system, the racism and patriarchy that has been accumulating in those systems. Because the problem isn't the patients. They are the result of an unequal system. Working with that, and I will give you a brief case study here, I work at a very different level than most of the people on this panel today. I am on the front lines. I am working with the physicians, I am working with the patients, and I am trying to resolve weaknesses in care delivery. So in this particular case study, which is a very high-level helicopter tour of this particular piece of work that I've been doing for 15 months with my assistant director, how can we improve racial disparities in cancer readmission? So the health system that we're working with here in Chicago, cancer patients of color are more than 1.5 times likely to readmit, meaning they leave the hospital, they go home, and they readmit within what Center for Medicare and Medicaid says is a 30-day window in which certainly if they came and they got care, they should be able to stay home for 30 days. And so what we saw here is that we have a standard of care that is not working for everyone. We sat down in looking at that particular problem with 20 patients. We met them bedside. We met them in the infusion bays when they were getting chemotherapy. And we talked to 21 healthcare workers. We talked to nurses, physicians. We talked to home health workers. We talked to community health workers. And we asked them questions about their experiences and what was challenging in the home setting when they left after being hospitalized. We also did observational work. We actually went back office and we watched current processes that prepare patients for home. So this is a photograph of what is called medical discharge rounds, MDRs. Medical discharge rounds are when all different members of the care team get together and they kind of huddle and they speed date around every patient's needs. Preparing, like, who needs home health, who's going to be staying discharged today, who's going to be staying another day, what kind of medications do they need, do they have the insurance that will actually support the services that they need. This is the kind of work we saw unfolding, and here is what we heard. First, getting and understanding medications is a challenge for many patients. So you can see the map on the right. This is the number of active pharmacy licenses in the state of Chicago, and I think this is from 2022. You can see there are far fewer dots in the neighborhoods where we have high concentrations of Black and brown people. Furthermore, not all of those licenses, even though they're active, are used. So it is physically very difficult to get your medications on the south side of Chicago. And we heard from caregivers, we're like, we have no idea. We're taking our loved ones home. We're still Googling what to do with these medications. These are a whole different regimen than we came in on. And nobody's taking the time to explain this to us. Inpatient nurses are equally vexed by this. They say, even if they, meaning the patients, don't have a complete understanding of their 90,000 medications, you still have to mark that they're adequate for discharge. If you are 65 or older, you are probably on 5 or more medications. If you are 65 or older and a cancer patient, you are probably on 10 plus medications. If you have any other conditions like congestive heart failure, diabetes, you are on more than those. So to have a medication change after you have been hospitalized, and oftentimes this is the first time anyone's telling you you have cancer, you have enormous gaps in the ability to monitor and adjust and create new habits and routines around your medications. Next thing we heard, these are very high level categories, is that medication discharge is really driven by efficiency rather than patient readiness. And what I mean by that is that it's so expensive to run a hospital that they will take something that you might call hospital discharge and preparing a patient for home and break it into very small tasks. And everybody who is the lowest cost person who could do that task is given that task. This creates incredible disjointment across the system. And it means most people don't actually know what the other people who are walking into the patient's room are actually saying or doing. So you can hear down here, the social worker is saying, the inpatient team is very focused on what we need to do to get this patient discharged, but they don't have the opportunity to look at the whole picture. And that is because it's literally no one's job to look at the whole picture of a patient. This is particularly a problem when you have vulnerable populations, such as people who are older or people of color who have fewer resources in their home setting. And we know here that the inpatient nurses say doctors will let some patients stay an extra day because they're more outspoken and negotiate with the doctor. And we asked, well, what kind of patients are those? And they said they're white patients. So number 3, and this is a significant issue, is that patients, as I said, they're sick. This is maybe the first time they've been told they have cancer. Patients and family members and the care team do not always agree on what will be needed at home. And so, for instance, this patient over here on the right-hand side, she says, I just want to go home because I'm really worried about my dog. Now, is this really the top priority? No, but that patient is very concerned about what has not been done in the home setting. And their dogs and their cats and their pets are real concerns for them. Additionally, that means that somebody who should really be going to a skilled nursing facility may say, no, I just want to go home. I want to sit in my favorite chair and read the Bible and do what comforts me and what feels like a holistic setting for myself. The problem is that when they're turning down services or they're not maybe given enough time to think about the services they need, the caregivers have to step in. And so we heard a lot of caregiver burnout, especially in cancer care. So you can see this person here saying, he's not sleeping, I'm not sleeping. And they very much want those services, but the patient doesn't want somebody in their home. They may not feel comfortable having somebody in their home. They don't actually, probably may not have had a great experience with the last time they were given home health or had an occupational therapist in their home. And so they're trying to avoid things that make them uncomfortable, and they just want to go back and return to their normal life. When those outpatient services fail, which they do often, the home health nurse never shows up. The physical therapist knocks on the door, nobody answers. Medication delivery, you have controlled substances that cannot be delivered without somebody actually receiving them at the door. Patient takes 20 minutes to get down to the door. This is not all working out very well. When those services fail, the information flow and accountability between these inpatient and outpatient teams who are supposed to be doing the service correction are not working. So for instance, from a patient's point of view, we kept hearing, somebody's always calling me. I feel like they're not talking to each other, which is true. They're not. very disjointed care delivery. And then you can see somebody whose job it is to try and do service correction says, there's no one place to see where patients have been discharged home with what their services were. I have to figure out what the problem is. I have to figure out who it belongs to because somebody made that judgment call, but it's not listed in the record. I have to call them. I have to tell them about the problem, call the patient back and tell them someone's going to fix it. These patients are falling through these gaps in care. What we proposed in this case was what we called equity enhanced discharge, which is a tailored process to move the standard of care closer to the people who are furthest away from it. And when we did our data analysis, that was patients of color, people who are 55 or older, it's a second vulnerability, and live in the 6 zip codes around this particular hospital. What we were suggesting is that these patients should be leaving with the medications in their hand. They need some mechanism to work with the care team to reintroduce their voice and their considerations and their concerns in the services that are being lined up for them at home. They need a human being to do that. It's not an AI job. And there needs to be some sort of coordination on the back end so that patients are not bearing the brunt of the disjointedness in care delivery. We also then, we do all our intervention design with people. This is that discharge checklist being co-designed with a multidisciplinary group. We spend an hour doing that. We work with patients and family members to make sure that interventions are actually fit for purpose. So the takeaway here is we can design equitable systems and equitable technologies and equitable tools that people want and will use, but we have to do it in a different way. We have to prioritize the goals of the end users. We have to include all the people who are going to be affected by the technology or the system, not just the people paying for it. We need to build for human activities, delving into those real world circumstances to understand what's actually happening, and therefore making it a priority that these tools are easier to implement. The idea that we are designing tools outside the context in which they will be used, I think, has a proven track record that is problematic. Designing for fit and feasibility, which is focusing on the context of use and the human beings who are being asked to use it, is something that we certainly do in our work, figuring out those last mile problems to make new capabilities actually fit for purpose. We think that this is something that can be done, and I think we need to do it in AI because the future, as Brett Victor, a very well-regarded UX designer, says, is a choice. We choose what to fund. We choose what to build. We choose what our visions are. And we should constantly be asking, why are we choosing that? Is that the future we want? And I will stop there. Thank you very much. I will turn it over.
Nice, very nice. And that QR code, I don't know if you all got it online, but the QR code is your contact information. Dr. Irwin, is that what that was?
That's the Equitable Healthcare Labs website, and all of the email that goes to the website comes to me directly.
Excellent. Okay. Hopefully you all grab that. And speaking of grabbing things, we want to make sure we're putting in the chat the links. We've got some follow-up materials that we want you all to have access to. So now you should have the resource guide. You should also have contact information for those of us on the international committee, so you can follow up with any additional questions that you have. We really appreciate what both Dr. Georges and Professor Irwin just shared with us. And so we're going to open it up again for Q&A. We can take another question, one question from our room, if anyone has one, and then 2 questions will be fielded online. So I'll start with anyone in the room. Anyone here have a question? You get to come up front. Does that make you excited? Be on Zoom. Going once? Yes, Lester McCarroll. All right, we have one question here, and then we will turn it over to you, Santosh.
Good evening, everybody. My brother Raymond Nelson, who's on the Zoom screen, will call this a provocation. We talk about AI and equity, and we talk about AI and ethics. I'd like perhaps any of the panelists, previous panelists, to talk about how do you distinguish between someone who's being ethical or someone who's operating just with a certain belief system that suggests that certain things aren't a priority. So for example, when you're talking about healthcare, if you have a belief system that someone's identity is a behavior and not a physical biological condition, how do you distinguish between what's ethical and what's just someone operating with their beliefs? That's something that's going to be very careful to navigate, and I'd like the panelists to talk about how you address those types of things.
Yeah, Lester, this is Georgius. How you doing, man?
All right.
You know, first of all, we all have our own life experiences. We bring those life experiences to the table. And at the end of the day, the way to do that is to have diversity in every aspect of the world. So we bring all those life experiences to every aspect, everybody's, life experiences. We live in a very diverse country, theoretically, but we all live in our own ecosystems, what we watch on TV, the social media we do. We've resegregated into communities, and diversity, equity, and inclusion was designed to try to break some of those barriers down. And now, for political reasons, we're running away from that concept. I would argue we need to make sure we continue to push that concept and make sure that people understand that race is a social construct, and not a biological one, and that life experiences, we build the community that we live in, and we build the downside of those communities. So I think that we've got to work with people. We got to start where they live, where they are, but we got to find ways to bring them along. And I think by exposing them to others, we can move a long way. But there's some people in their lifetime, you're never gonna move.
Yeah, I would like to weigh in. That's a big question. I don't claim to have the answer, but I know that one thing that does correct is a diversity in the workforce, that we need work cultures that have diverse perspectives and experiences in them. And I think that a challenge we have is that we don't have that in healthcare, not in ways that represent the population. And I think that the gap between when people go in and are trained and are actually kind of let loose in the health system, the world changes pretty dramatically in that 8 to 12 years, depending on the specialty. I think that we need to really prioritize diversifying the workforce and creating and reducing barriers in the payment for that educational system, because right now we know that young medical students are being redirected into specialty care because they're graduating with enormous amounts of debt. And this is, they are concentrated in urban environments. We need to create workplace cultures that can correct and normalize broader perspectives.
All right. Nice. Nice. Thank you for that, Lester, that great question, and also for you all's responses to it. So keeping us moving forward, I just want to make one correction. Dr. Georges C. Benjamin, you received the Professional Achievement Award from Illinois Tech. I didn't say your title of your award earlier, so forgive me for that. But moving on, let's do this. We have a lot of students who are here. Some of them have had to go back to study, but I want us to share with all of you now a quick video that shows not only students, but also alum, that really focuses on what we're doing here tonight and the fact that we are all proud, as I said earlier, to be either members of the Illinois Tech community in one way or another, whether we're faculty, staff, student, or alum. So if we can drop the video now to share with this group, or the two videos I think there are, just to give a sense of what we're excited about this evening.
Typing the sound in, I will drop the videos in the chat.
Okay, so no sound, Joe.
Yeah, it's not giving me the option this time around to share the sound.
Okay, anticlimactic. I apologize. We're gonna drop the link to the video in the chat so you all can take a look at it later on at your leisure, but it's a great video snippet, so we want to make sure you have an opportunity to view it. Next up, I'm going to segue and see, Santosh, do we have any questions online? Forgive me, I skipped that part. I didn't
No,
know.
there were no questions online.
Okay,
But
thank
but
you.
let me just ask a quick
Yes.
question to Professor Irvine. You started off the experiment that you shared. You said that there were a lot of readmissions that were going on, and hence you went in with the model that you did from a design perspective. By how much did the readmissions, if any, drop post what you implemented from your design perspective?
I'm sorry, could you repeat the question?
Yeah, no, if I understood right, when you started this experiment, the design experiment that you went through, you said that there were a lot of readmissions that were going on from a particular population of people, and hence you picked this whole exercise to do. Did you monitor to see how much it dropped by once you went in and implemented this new methodology of yours?
Yes, this is so we did this work in fall of 2023. We are currently piloting because we had 4 interventions, and we are on intervention number 3.
Okay.
That is underway. It takes an enormous amount of time to make a change in a care delivery system.
It does. I've been there. So that's what I just wanted to figure out, saying, did this really move the needle immediately, or it's like a much longer change that needs to happen?
Yeah, we're actually running controlled pilots
Okay.
on these studies.
All right. Thank you. Nothing else, Shanita. We can go on to the next panel.
Okay, thank you, Santosh. And so now we have our final panel, and I want to thank you all for sticking it out with us, particularly, as I mentioned, the students who are still here. So thank you, Patrick, Natalie Champagne, and others who ensured that we had the students here. Bernie, of course, as I mentioned earlier. So our last panel is going to deal with AI and mental health. This is the last topic. We thought it was fitting to include this as part of the discussion this evening. We have 2 experts that are going to come up and share what they know, their knowledge behind this idea, and that is Mr. Sabe Anderson, followed by Nathan Broderick. They're both going to be joining us virtually, and I'm going to pass the baton to both of them. Thank you so much.
Thank you for having us. This is amazing. So I'm Sabe Anderson. I will kick off. Can everybody hear me okay? I know I can't see everybody, but I got one nod. Excellent. So just to introduce myself and AI Vector, we've been entrenched in AI with behavioral health for about a year now. I have been in healthcare for about 16 years. I started what I kind of laugh about in the 1900s in software, in the 1990s. And that was when manufacturing systems and Salesforces were first being introduced to ERPs, enterprise resource planning tools. So I've been in software for a long time, started in system administration, got into healthcare in 2008. The same year, 2008, Nate, who you'll hear from now, also started AI Vector. So if you can imagine a name called AI Vector in 2008, it was pretty prolific at the time and innovative. And so many years later, just about a year and a half ago, we came together. I'm helping doing distribution, sales into my networks and healthcare for AI Vector. I've been able to work with over 500 electronic medical records. I've put e-prescribing applications into over 300 EMRs. I've been able to put medication adherence and pharma coupons and why to go fill the prescriptions. Also lots of credit card payments and revenue cycle management tools. We belong to a family office where we roll up revenue cycle management companies and help the administrative staff in the office. We've purchased 9 RCM companies. AI Vector has been rolled up into that family office and is our AI solution. So we're happy to have Nate talk to you here in a couple of minutes. We took on a customer called Impact Suite about a year ago, and that's what we're going to highlight today. I've worked with Johns Hopkins for over a year, helping them sell their behavioral health tool. I work with about 11 EMRs with several things in behavioral health. I'm very familiar with the workflow, the clinical workflows, all the burdens, tasks, the SOAP note process, documenting the patient's clinical woes. I'll say it that way. And then also helping the business side of the doctors so that the business side doesn't get in the way of the doctors focusing their attention on the patients, because that's what matters most. We're all in healthcare or education for a reason. I have a personal reason to be in behavioral health. It's not all I do, but it's about 80%. I'm actually at a human trafficking event right now, and I just spoke with some of the top people in human trafficking, and one of the major things is AI. And we are taking this AI tool also into the human trafficking space, because everybody that has been exploited, hurt, injured needs behavioral health as well, and mental wellness. I was diagnosed with a mental health condition in the 90s and have gone many, many years through addiction and bankruptcy and destroying my life, and was able to rebound, reconcile, rebuild my career. And so I'm a very passionate person when it comes to behavioral health. So when I was able to find Nate and get an AI tool that can get people information quickly and more efficiently, and I love the question just asked about ethics. I've got a lot of opinions. They're just opinions, but I have a lot of opinions there. It's very important to cut down the schedules if we can for the therapist and psychiatrist. And the way we can do that is accessibility to proper content. So we have spent the last year training an AI tool, and it's just like training an employee, right? We have to, there's about 46,000 conversations every week that we're having with employers and their employees around mental health and mental wellness, financial wellness, which ties in to mental health. And we've had to get feedback over that year on what's proper to be talking about. Is this a therapy situation? Is this a psychiatry situation? Is this a suicidal ideation situation? And what do we do about that? And when somebody brings up an illegal discussion, what do we do with that? So it's been very trying and very rewarding at the same time to create an intelligence around content and how to triage information in conversations. And if we can do that properly, then we can provide, it's very hard to go get a therapist. If any of you have ever tried to go get a therapist, some people wait 3-4 months to get into a therapist, and getting into a psychiatrist is hard. When I first got diagnosed, I spent a lot of time on WebMD. I don't know if it was called WebMD back then, but I spent a lot of time on the internet trying to figure out what I had, what was wrong with me. I didn't know what was wrong with me. And then when I started figuring out a few things, I tried to get an appointment. And so I went to a therapist thinking I could get medication. I had no idea that therapist didn't prescribe medication. So then I had to go through that. And then I had to get on the psychiatrist schedule, right? And then I had to worry about refills. And then I had to worry about reconciling my life. I didn't have a proper tool that could care navigate information, schedules, check-in, content around finance, content around resume building. If we can't pay for our bills, that provides stress in mental health, right? So we've built this tool to be an overall wellness. Over 70% of employees now identify with anxiety in the workplace. Before COVID, 20 to 40%, depending on the statistics you look at, the depression diagnosis have gone up. With all of us sitting in our homes, it impacted us. And so there's been a great surge for mental health needs. And we're in a shortage, We also put this tool into prison reform. We've put it into case management's hand, so they can provide accessibility to first level offenders, second level offenders, so they don't become third level offenders, right? So how do you spread a net wide enough, but yet keep it consistent and triage the proper information? So there's still a lot of work to be done. AI is helping us provide content faster. We're training it. It doesn't sleep. It doesn't take time off, right? Maybe one day it'll ask for a raise, right? But we're able to free up coaches' calendars. We're able to free up the therapist calendars. And of course, again, we have to be very careful in what is a proper conversation with AI. And so Nate, who is going to show you how we built this tool, we've the Impact Suite product, which is one of many. We're also putting this in another product here soon, but this one has teletherapy, mental health coaching. There was 10 mental health coaches in this application. They were very nervous about taking on a very big employer because they were going to have to hire up a large coaching staff, and it was going to be very expensive. Now, those 10 coaches are checking in with the AI sometimes to make sure that their answers are proper, because we've trained it off of them. And Nate's going to get into AI that hallucinates, that doesn't hold a conversation. How can you be in a 3-hour conversation with an open source AI? It's very difficult. So Nate will talk about that. We have peer support, risk assessments. This AI has gone to the next level of checking back in with the patients. So we can read their goals, what's going on, and if they've put the app down, or we can, through assessments, we can check back in with them and engage them again. So it's kind of like a Sherpa, somebody that can help you climb the mountain. So it's not just a reactive chat bot. It's actually checking into the data that you set and holding you accountable to that. I work with a lot of CEOs in healthcare, and I've met one that I liked his explanation of AI. He builds AI to be assistive to the doctor, not the other way around. We shouldn't be forcing doctors codes and hallucinating open source AI and telling the doctor what to do. I will always be a firm believer that intelligence is always greater than artificial intelligence. And it's a tool. Yes, AI can gather and access and quickly provide access, but put in the hands of a proper person, it's a great tool. It's in its infancy. I'm saying that wrong, but it's continuing to grow. It's knocking out simple tasks and doing simple things now. So we're excited to be a part of this. I work with about 100,000 therapists and about 40,000 psychiatrists. We take this to EMR channels for many, many things. Am I missing anything? You guys can see I like to talk a lot. Let me see. Yeah, I mean, that's really it. I want to introduce Nate. How much time do we have, Nate, here? So Nate will go through how we built this tool. Super excited about it. We're excited to take it to the market, and it takes all of us. It's not just one company that's going to do it. It's not one doctor. It's not one hospital system. It's everybody on this globe loving and helping all humanity, and it takes many AI tools, many people to do this. So we're super excited to be a part of this team, and thank you for the opportunity.
All right. So now that Sabe's talked about the why and why we got into this, and more who we talked to and that, we'll get into the how and how we made all this come about. So anyway, a little more about AI Vector. Yeah, we started out in 2008. So I named the company AI Vector, since at the time we were working with what Jennifer referred to as algorithm AI. And so the algorithm AI was really useful in working with these companies like Johns Hopkins University, Dell, Sephora, Cisco. Not sure you can see all that with the slide, so with that. So we worked with all those companies, and then at the time it was used for monitoring and auto restarting services and that. So more of system-based AI at the time, or well, algorithms. And then part of my background is I worked as an engineer at Nu Skin, which is now a $3 billion company. So that's the background of how all this came about. So anyway, here's why we love AI. It just helps us do everything. It helps us. We think that a rocket ship will be built, and you're going to use AI to build it. So it's going to be a better, faster built rocket ship. Same goes with medical. I can't imagine the future without AI in medical. I love to have that second system looking at it and helping us determine better tech. So it makes a doctor that's a okay doctor, a great doctor, and it makes a great doctor a phenomenal doctor. So that's the way we view AI. Now the other thing, going based off of Jennifer and what she was talking about, there's a thing called hallucinations with AI. Hallucinations are a very real problem, and they can really make things interesting when you're having people talk with the AI that gives up, fake answers, or it just makes stuff up as you go. And that's always, I think, always going to be a problem until we enhance AI. More training does help that. So as we further tune our models and we further make our AI better, that does work to help it become better. And that's what we've done with our current platform and system to make it a better system. So what we also know about AI, just like any other tech, AI 2 years ago is not the same AI that's now. So even though companies have gotten in there and they've started putting in AI, they started using it, that AI might get replaced over time with a better AI. So as we see that happen, we're going to see a lot of that future tech coming in, and that we're really excited about that as part of the future, because AI will just continue to get better. And we'll go over the progression just in the last 8 months with our AI and how that works. It's about a year actually. So we work with a company starting out this Impact Suite that Seb was talking about. When we first started this, the documentation for building out the AI was almost non-existent. So we looked everywhere to figure out how to build this from the ground up. Since we couldn't connect to the outside, we couldn't use ChatGPT for any of this. It had to be HIPAA compliant. We actually started looking at different tech that was out there and finally found the tech we were looking for to get this all started. So we started by training the model, tuning it. We actually got we bought some pretty big graphic cards at the time to be able to start doing all this. And we found at the very beginning, it was taking us, in one case, a month to train one of our models that we were using. So it was a really long process. We were doing things in the middle of it to try to get it going. So a little bit about Impact Suite. It's a medical health coach system. And so what's nice about it is it just helps people get better. So people can type in and write the AI and talk to it in the middle of the night. They don't have to call anybody. No one's got to come over the house. They can have really private conversations with it and everything. And the cool part about it is it really helps them out. Now here's couple funny things about it. So it's a health coach, medical coach, and we also found out that people started flirting with our AI. So that was a little bit on the strange side. We've seen that happen a few times, but it's realistic enough that people think that the thing's real, and that's kind of a fun anecdote for it. So here's what the AI kind of felt like, so everyone who's seen Monty Python, this is one of the best lines out of there. It just felt like everything was tipping over on us at the beginning. It was the AI was making up things at the beginning, and we'll go into a little bit of that here. And really, it did take about 4 cycles to get the AI working as good as it is now. And there are improvements that we can even make on this existing AI, and we've been making those strides in other projects and products as well. So anyway, here's what happened on our first attempt with the AI. As Jennifer said, the CPU on our AI was taking, if you were to run 5 of these all at the same time, it would actually crash our servers and it would bring them down. It was horrific. The first attempt, when we first started building the AI, our queries and questions came back 1.5 minutes after I'm just going through and asking it one question. If you wrote the word hello, you're still waiting 40 to 45 seconds on that. So that was that one. A couple other things that happened. It didn't have memory. So the version 1 didn't even have any way to recognize you were having a conversation with it. So it was really rough to work with. And that was that was very difficult because no one could get any help with it at that time. It just gave you one answer back and then didn't remember anything about you. It hallucinated a lot more at the beginning, and that was partially due to our models, our training, and the way we were doing that at the beginning. So all of that put together made it really hard to work with our AI. We were frustrated, obviously, and the client was like, hey, this doesn't give us what we need at this time. So we took another stab at it. So the second attempt, we noticed we started cutting the size down just by changing the models, working with those. We cut it down to 20 seconds. So we were pretty happy at that time. Memory was added now, so we're able to just actually have conversations. However, you couldn't put too big of a size of a question in there. So if you asked it too big of a question, the server would crash, and then it would forget that you were talking to it. It was quite painful at that time. But it was really fun trying to get this thing going. We still were determined to make it work. We started analyzing the problems, analyzing how to get that fixed. And again, even during the second iteration, so this is within month 1 or 2, the libraries behind this were not working that well. We were actually pretty shocked about that. And the other thing that was really frustrating was, obviously the token limit context size was bad. And then the context, just to talk about that a little bit, is what it trains or tells the AI to be when it goes in and asks the question. So if you write the word hello, this is the behavior of it. So the context that we had from Impact Suite was too large for the model. So if you'd go in and talk to it more than about 6 to 10 times, it would run out of memory and it would crash. And then at this time, again, we kept seeing the crashes. We were working with it at that time, and it was pretty choppy. But at this time, the customers actually started seeing things. So this is really our alpha and just a few customers at this time. The third iteration is when we started seeing some things. We decided and worked with the memory. We moved that to a database, making sure it would pull every single time. We updated the tech. So at this time, we got a better model, and this made it so it would actually give us responses back in less than 5 seconds. So this time, we knew we had something good. We added in something called a status query. And what was neat about the status query was this was something that both Impact Suite and us came up with. It's a query that didn't need to look up everything, but it was a check-in query. So people could say, you're at 90%, you're doing good, and then it would write the customer based off the AI language. So it's more of a check-in. So we added that new type of tech. And then couple things about this. When we first started, after it would crash a server, the guardrails would be removed. And so people would ask questions like, can I watch pornography 24/7? And then is cocaine great? And it would actually say, yeah, that's fine, that's wonderful. And that was terrible for the application. So that's something that we addressed really quickly. That's why the memory was moved into the database, and we did a whole bunch to clean that up. The rollout was really buggy at this stage too. So we had to actually work on our rollout process to make sure that we were working better with it. The amount of people that were typing in as well was kind of overwhelming. So we needed to work with that too. We added in a little bit of things called suicide detection. So if the person was talking about suicide or harm, we added in, though it would detect that from the language of the person. So it's actually got multiple parts of AI integrated into our models. And then one of the sad parts about the beginning part here was the AI once told somebody to go kill themselves, just like the other model did that Jennifer was talking about. Super scary stuff when you don't have those guardrails in, and you don't have that. So that's something that we corrected, and thank goodness we did right there, because yeah, we haven't seen that happen ever since we've corrected that. But then we also updated the instance to handle more than 2048 tokens. And now the model is able to handle a lot more over time. So those are some really nice parts about it. So at the very end, we got the server time up to 5 seconds. And then we enhanced what's called RAG augmentation. We started working really heavily with what's called RAG augmentation. And that's the way that we were able to help the system and make it so that it can give back correct answers. And so we've been fine tuning the RAG augmentation ever since, working with the company, and there's always improvements we're making with that. Our response times got really good. Sometimes they're a little bit longer depending on how long the conversation's been going, but it handles the conversations just fine now. What we found out through this whole process is we needed to implement a new routing system that would route the language according to where it needed to go. So that way, if they're talking about suicide, it can route it to a certain spot. They're talking about other areas, it can route it properly. So you get the best answers possible. And that's something that we found out that we needed to do for this final iteration. So there was a lot of learning through this, and a lot of pain. You don't want to get woken up in the middle of the night or 8 o'clock and saying, hey, this thing just told somebody to go kill themselves, and they're working through some things. And, so we had to be really careful and go through that and help work through it. And at that time, at this final iteration, yeah, we've got most of those things worked out. It seems to work really well, cleaning that up. And so anyway, here's the lessons learned through the whole thing. We learned that we needed to speed up the AI to be responsive. We learned that proper memory usage with an AI is super important. AI out of the gate doesn't have memory, so you have to do that. We learned that you had to add AI to a database, and there's lots of things we do with the database now that helps it work really well. Better hardware. So yeah, that's sad, but better hardware makes it work faster. And that's certainly what it did right there. So we got some good hardware for it. One of the interesting parts are different models with the AIs work better than other models. So the more you train a model, you still have to run it up against tests. So we added in testing for our models, and we added ways to check our models to make sure that the answers it's giving are what the customer would expect, and it has a full load of that. The last thing is proper load balancing. So just making sure that all the systems and all the AIs are capable of responding, and that each customer will be able to still talk with the AI without it inhibiting or crashing the system. So we had to be super careful about how we distributed each call, and that required quite a bit of work, just making that all function. So anyway, those are the things we've learned working with AI. It's been absolutely enjoyable. I love working in this field. We're working with, like Sabe said, we're at an event right now that works with the Children's International Rescue Foundation. We're trying to help help groups with this AI. We're trying to bring it out more and more so that it can do some of the nasty work that nobody wants to do. But that's it. And hopefully this made a lot of sense. And really enjoyed talking with you guys. I wish I could see y'all in person, and some same time probably not.
We'll change that. We want to see you all in person too. So you'll have to
Uh,
come down here to Illinois Tech's campus. Just give them a round of applause this last. Wonderful, wonderful. Let me just say to both of you, to Sabe, you and Nathan, very thoughtful. All of the presentations tonight were very thoughtful and very insightful. This one in particular resonated for many reasons, a little bit differently than the others. Sabe, thank you so much for your transparency and your vulnerability in that presentation. You shared some really personal items, and Nathan, is obvious the passion that you both have for this, and you sharing your iterations, and you said blood, sweat, and tears. And so we can relate to that for different reasons, especially our students here. Haha. All right, so thank you both for that presentation. Do we have any questions? This is the last opportunity. There's my friend there. How you doing, darling? Any questions from anyone? You have a question, Al? Well, come on up since I pointed you out. Give them a round of applause. Excellent. Say your name and your major, please, when you come on up, so we know. All right, thank you. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Olisa. I'm a third year mechanical engineering major. I just want to ask a quick question. You're obviously a very big expert on AI and everything. While you were talking about hallucinations and how AI, when you ask like ChatGPT or anything like that, or Cloud AI, it kind of begins to ramble on, kind of just make up information as it goes. I mostly heard about like it's not necessarily the question you ask, but how you ask the question. But what do you think is the best guideline on asking ChatGPT questions to get accurate answers back from it?
No, excellent question. So I know they talk about prompt engineering, and that's one of the first things is I noticed early on that ChatGPT, when I'd misspell something, it would give me a totally different answer, or if I'd say it a certain way. So first off, it's how you ask the question, and then with ChatGPT, for example, telling it that it got it wrong and correcting it and say, no, you got that wrong, correct this part, and going back and helping it that way. Hallucinations themselves, there's actually multiple steps for cleaning up hallucinations with your data. So one of the things we noticed with RAG augmentation, it's how you inserted the document will actually change the data too. And then the other part that we do to help reduce hallucinations is in through what's called the context. And we make sure that what's going into the AI and what is getting in, what's being talked about has some controls over it too. So that all those things together help reduce those hallucinations. So did that answer the question there?
What exactly do you mean by context? Like,
yeah,
sure. Is it like kind of like narrowing down what exactly it searches to give you an answer?
So context is part of that, yes. So a context has what's called, this is what we call it anyway, the context itself is the behavior of how you want the AI to work. So for example, if I want my AI to talk like a pirate, and I say, hey, talk like a pirate, and then the query is, then you put the question in with it, and both of those together with the type of RAG augmentation that we've got, or the type of vector DB, whatever model you guys use or to fine tune it, that all those put together in conjunction helps make it give you the best answers. What we also found out with your prompt engineering, we're pretty specific when we're asking the questions. So lots of times I'll spend a bunch of time just putting it in like a text pad and then marking down everything that I want in order. And then it usually gives me back way better responses. So there's a lot to do with how you ask the questions to it, and the amount of time you give into just the amount of time you give it asking questions will give you back better answers. So if you think about it this way, ChatGPT or other AIs, it's all a mathematical equation on the back. So it just says how many zeros and ones matched up with what matched up with what you're asking it. So the closer you get to that, the less hallucinations you're going to have. So yeah, that's the idea, is making sure that those questions going into it are accurate, making sure that they're concise, and then you'll get the best answers.
Thank you so much.
Yeah.
Wonderful question. Just so y'all know, that's one of my mentees. So I'm just gonna, it's a wonderful question. It really was, but I'm gonna tell him that. Yay, give him a round of applause. Mechanical engineering major, mechanical engineering. Okay, so let me say this. We are wrapping up now. There are no questions online.
No,
I
so,
do want, oh,
so
Santos
Srinita,
will
Ray,
go.
no, Ray has his hand up, so I think he has a question, so we
Oh,
should let him
okay.
ask it.
All right. Yes, Ray, please.
Okay, and actually, I had two questions, but I'll try to keep them to where they can provide
Just
quick
do a
answers.
combo, Ray, please.
Yes, so the first is more of a gimme. Opportunities for first responders, law enforcement, active duty, and in the military, as well as veterans. Do you see that based on what you have presented earlier? Particularly from the PTSD standpoint?
From like military and working with the, yeah, we're working with several people on that right now. So yeah, with the police, we're working with, there's a PTSD system, and we're working with VR with that. So we're integrating AI with VR to help policemen with PTSD. So it's a unique system, kind of uses some of the same tech we used for to create Impact Suite. So that's some of it. And then the other one we're working with is the Children's International Rescue Foundation. So we're working with them to help the police so it can do the work instead of having this guy. I mean, real people have to get involved in these conversations. And if you've seen those, they're extremely painful.
Sure.
And even the training is really hard on that too.
Mhm.
You know, someone has to read that data and those prompts and things. So it's hard. And then yeah, in terms of, let's see, policemen, I'm missing one right here.
The military, active duty, and veterans.
Right. And all of this ties into the same thing with PTSD. So what's neat about this new tech and who we're working with it as well, they've got some new anti-PTSD tech that helps the cops and it helps the military and all that process this information, and it helps them work through the PTSD. So we're still working on the training on that, and we're working through that. But yeah, it's very interesting, very fun to work and in some cases really challenging. So just because, you know, like I said, the AI, you start working on it and it gives you these hallucinations. Sometimes you're like, that's not what you should have said. And so you have to go back and recalibrate everything to get it to function right in the way that it should be working. So
Okay, great. And then another quick question, because I know
Well,
Anita is
yeah,
on my
you
back.
know, I love you, but okay, like 10 seconds because we gotta get these folks out of here. We
Yes.
promise, Ray.
Okay, all right. So
So that's question and response, 10
yes.
seconds each. Okay.
yeah, so interpreting lab results like from LabCorp or Quest, do you see opportunities, particularly for people who aren't technically trained to understand the actual results? Thank you.
Yes, absolutely. So AI can be used to see any pattern, and that's what we found out early on. Just depends on the training data and what we feed it, and then what our expected response is. So do I see that it can do that? Absolutely. And yeah, from what we've seen, you either train a model from the ground up, or you can use some existing stuff that's out there. And yeah, it's great.
Great.
Let's do it.
Good. Give them a round of applause. Very nice. Thank you, Nathan. Thank you, Ray. Wonderful questions. And I want to make sure we do answer all of your questions. They're thoughtful. Please populate them in the chat. As I mentioned earlier, if we can't get to all of them in real time, as we have gotten to the end of our program, we will follow up. Our experts have said that they will do that. I'm saying y'all said that, but we're going to pretend you did. And we will send you all that information. Speaking of which, in the chat, if you didn't do this already, for those who are still present, let us know where you're from. We just want to make sure we know who's represented, where y'all are from. Put that there. We have a survey that we're going to now populate in the chat. Not sure how we're disseminating it to this room here.
Everyone who registered will receive
Only if you have good comments, fill out the survey. That's the only feedback we want. But we'll share that data with you all as speakers as well. Again, let me just recap and give you all the context as we're wrapping up this evening. Did you all have a good time? Those of you present in the room? Yes? Okay. How about online? Can I see you? I can't see. I can see my fellow committee members. Professor Irwin, everybody, y'all have a good time? Okay, hope you did. This was an intentional approach tonight. As I mentioned, the International Committee, we wanted to have you unpack AI in a different way. We did this last year for those of you who were with us for the global gathering. That was more of a general AI conversation, and we celebrated the birthday of the cell phone. This year, we thought we were going to focus on healthcare, but we also felt we were going to do it under the three categories that you heard: equity, equality, and mental health. And what came out tonight, it warrants further dialogue, further conversation, because we understand that race, equity, a lot of things were touched on tonight that we can go and spend a lot of more time in. To the students in particular, I want you all to take this back to your classes. Derek, as leader in SGA, thank you for getting all of your fellow SGA members to come out here tonight. Appreciate you, and making sure that you all are taking away some things. And last but not least, the Leap of Faith technology students, are you all still here? You all come on up front. I want you to see them. John, come up with them. Give them a round of applause. They are graduate students who are working on a lot of different projects. They are interns, we're successful interns. Y'all line up, we're gonna get a photo. Bob, can you come up here, George? We're gonna get a photo with them. I'm gonna tell you what their topics are for those of you online: AI-driven care, companionship, transformative or transforming clinical data in AI in healthcare, translating complex clinical guidelines, use of AI in ambient tools, and extracting clinical and social insights. So these students, I know you all can't see them online, but we're going to share this photo with you. They are here. We have alumni here, as I mentioned. We have people in the professional field that are here. Y'all just come wave. I'm gonna put one student here. You wave to him, girl. Wave, yay! All right, so you know I'm not making it up. Santosh, can you say some words? We're gonna take a quick picture. I'm gonna turn it over to my partner in crime here. Santosh, say something. We'll be right back in 2 seconds. All right.
Sure. No,
Are they all up here? All right.
I'd like to thank all the presenters today. I think it was a great job of setting the context of what's going on in the industry and also your personal experiences. I think the questions were answered pretty well. So thank you all for your participation and keeping the audience engaged. And I think this is just scratching the surface. AI is, I would say, in its infancy at this point in time, but there's a whole lot of things that have been changing. And as as Dr. DeWinter said in the beginning, AI means a lot of things to a lot of people, starting with machine learning, with what's going on with today with ChatGPT, which again, everybody thinks that's all in itself, but then large language models themselves have a whole lot of variation that is there. So I think there's going to be more evolving, and the more people get to interact with it and work with it, I think it'll sort of lead to better outcomes, which is what we really want from this space. So thanks for an engaging conversation.
Excellent. Again, all of our phenomenal speakers, you all really blew the roof off. Your approach, your detail, your energy, your spirit, we felt you were really passionate about this topic. It's bigger than just AI. It's about humanity and what we can do to make it better. So we appreciate that. To all the alum in the room, can you raise your hands in the air like you just don't care? If I didn't call you out, because I didn't know your name. I apologize, but we love you, Illinois Tech alum, students, soon to be alum. Connect with these folks so that you know who they are in the chat. Santosh and I have put our LinkedIn information, our contact information, follow up with us. Thanks, everyone. We're going to give you back your rest of your Saturday. We appreciate you and love you. Thank you, everyone. Thank you. Oh, and Joe, my bad, and Anna, and my bad, and Ashley. We love all of y'all. All right. Thank you. That's the advancement team. All right. Bye.